Welcome, everybody. We're getting started since 10 o'clock. My name is Jennifer Wright. I'm on the board, and I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. I've actually been following him since probably 2008 when your big video came out. Michael Wesch is an anthropology professor. Wouldn't think there would be much connection to technology, but he's done lots of research, starting in Papua New Guinea, but lots of research around the impact of social technology on society. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Michael. You'll hear a little bit more before the keynote as well. Welcome.
All right, so this is going to be pretty informal. Feel free to interrupt. I'm going to walk you through my journey to where I'm at today and how I came to question our fundamental ideas about learning. That's what I'm interested in. But to start, and actually everything I learned, I largely learned from these guys who have virtually no technology that you're familiar with. But it was living with them for 8 years that actually allowed me to have a lot of insight into what technology does, having no access to it at all for that time. So these are my friends in New Guinea. This is a picture of me with my friends, and I'll skip that one since it's kind of inappropriate. But that's how we dress when we're there. So to get into this area, I started right out of undergrad. I flew to New Guinea and then ended up flying into the center of the island here. And when you're flying to this airstrip here, there's no electricity, no running water, no internet access, no cell phone access. It's completely cut off. In fact, there's not even money. Your money's no good once you land. There's nothing to buy, and nobody will know what to do with your money. And so this is once I got there, I started walking, and I went even further, 2 days walk away from that airstrip, past villages like this. And while I was there, new media came in. So there was like no media, and there are 10 guys in right were born in the and so that new media was in like right. And when these guys came back, they immediately set to work doing the work of books, like taking a kind of thing. And just to give you a sense of how different this is and how different their consciousness is before media, when they start doing the census book, they have a real problem, and that is that they're just everybody's name, but a lot of people in the village don't even have a name. And they don't have a name because everybody they ever see, they already know, and they have a relationship with that person, and they call that person by that relationship. In the same way that you call your mom, mom, or your sister, sister, whatever you might do, or your wife, honey. Those were the kinds of names people had. So when suddenly they're asked to give them their name, they're like, well, I guess, and then a lot of them said awem, which means taboo, which means we don't have a relationship, and therefore you don't have a name for me. You shouldn't know a name for me. So as they're writing down awem several times, like, okay, this is weird, what's going on? And then they realized what was going on. So these people had to invent names for themselves, and they adopted the English word census. And it was kind of an interesting start of a shift toward more individualism. After the census, they also started redesigning villages. The villages used to look more like this, which kind of look kind of haphazard, and houses are just in that. But in fact, they're actually arranged relationally. So these two are close friends, and then this group over here is close friends. But after the census, they started lining up their houses in straight, nice rows here, which was really hard to do because they had to flatten out all these little mounds and so on with nothing but sticks. And then they planned it all out on a grid system that matched the census book. So each house was numbered by the census book. So this is a really good example of how media was actually rewriting culture. And the idea here is that media are not just tools or not just communication, but they actually mediate relationships. So when media change, our relationships change, and ultimately we change. And that becomes like the foundation for an anthropological approach to media, is really thinking about like how relationship, and you're always thinking about the people, not just the technology. So like today, I study Instagram, but I'm really thinking about how people are connecting through those things, not just the technology itself. So another change that happened in New Guinea was when they had a big dispute, they used to kind of gather out in the open area and they would try to settle the dispute, and they were really trying to heal the relationship. And once the book came in, the writing, they had this written list of laws, which they never had before. And now they're holding individuals to the letter of the law rather than trying to heal relationships. So that caused a lot of uproar as well. So finally, these 10 people who could read and write decided to hold a meeting, and really into writing. They're very much seduced by this medium. It's very powerful. So the first order of business at the meeting was to vote on whether or not they should have more meetings, and they unanimously voted yes. And then the second order of business to they should keep their basically forcing people to move into new villages that were straight with numbered houses, and they again unanimously voted yes. And they actually then enforced this by actually going. Yeah. Right. So the other rule that was upon people who can read and vote, and so it's kind of terrible. It's a really good example of like the power of media. The people who can't by it, but the fact is they are used by it. And that's what surprised me the most, was that these people were so sophisticated with the medium, also the most seduced by it. And 3 months after all this started, of course, there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of fights going on. And they looked at what they had created and didn't like what they saw. The villages were clean and straight, but mostly empty. People had sort of ran off to the bush just to be away from all the tension. And they were really saddened by what they had created. And so when I came back for studying, in what ways are we being seduced by the medium? Like they were seduced by the clean lines and the idea of this beautiful looking village on these straight lines, And I started wondering, how are we? And so came a lot of my research moving forward based on this idea that we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. And so when I came back, like all of this stuff was just getting started. This is now 2004 when I get back from New Guinea. And Facebook was just up, Wikipedia was just getting traction, blogs were getting popular. Twitter wasn't even there yet, YouTube wasn't there yet, but they were, the basic ideas were emerging. And so that's when I created this video that Jennifer mentioned. And I won't show the whole thing. It's just the basic idea is to talk about how our communication changed as we went from, say, written text on paper, and then what happens when it goes digital. And so this gets kind of geeky here, so I'll speed up through the geeky part. But the geeky part is just saying that like when you shift, even on the back end, like from old HTML to newer versions of, say, XML, and then now HTML5, like you can separate form and content, which allows all these Web 2.0 like things to emerge, so that the web is not just linking information, it's linking people, and these people are all sharing and trading and collaborating and so on. And so that's why at the end of the video here I say that we have to rethink a few things. And again, like in line with how I think as an anthropologist, like I really feel like you have to rethink everything, because this is about human relationships, and that's why you have to also rethink love, family, and ourselves. So that video published in 2007, and after 2 days I had 250 views. As an anthropologist, like more than 200 people, you're a big deal. so I actually took a picture of it. That's why the screenshot exists. Like I took the screenshot and I sent it to my department. He was like amazed. We actually had a party that Friday night. like all the faculty came out, and like it only had 253 views. This is amazing. And then the next morning, I just opened up my browser, and then it had like 1,000 views, and it was like doubling every time. And then somebody emailed me the next morning and said, "Did you see you're in the top 5?" And there it was in the top 5 of all talked about videos. And so now I'm like obsessed with this, and my wife obsessed, and we're both like in the basement where our computer is and just like hitting refresh, refresh, refresh. And we're hoping it gets to #1 before like the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl Sunday, and we're thinking like, so we're hitting refresh, 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 and sure enough, by noon that day, it had reached #1. So I took another screenshot and sent it to my department head with some note about getting tenure or something like that. But it's an interesting moment because here comes commercials, and so Doritos at that time was actually thinking, well, we could save a lot of money by just having our consumers make the video. So they held a contest, and they had thousands of submissions, and then they collected the top 5, and they let people vote on the top 5 to decide which one air on the Super Bowl. And there was a reason why they picked the top 5. This is a similar effort by Chevy, and they had put their Tahoe out here where you could like make your own little video and add your own text, and they got all kinds of stuff like this. And wild place, and so Doritos doesn't want that to happen, so they lock down the top 5, and then you can vote on the top 5, and this one wins. But what's more interesting than actually showing the video is to point out that they asked these 2 guys who made it, who are just 21-year-old college guys, and they asked how much did that cost, and they said $12.79, which is a big savings on $1 million. And it actually did very well. It was in the top 5 of most effective commercials, in terms of like emotional draw that as USA Today measures it. But it does cost, as you can see, $2.6 million just to buy the spot. So in total, you're still talking about $2.6 million to produce this commercial. And meanwhile, they then asked executives, like, why do you spend this kind of money? It used to be all about water cooler talk. You wanted people talking about the next day at the water cooler. And of course now, with Facebook and Twitter, we want people, talking about our stuff online. And the next day, the video that was talked about online cost $0 to produce, because that was still my video, which was sort of this amazing moment, that I'm actually working in the basement of this little farmhouse in Kansas on a really junky laptop that you could sell on eBay for like $100, and this is what the world had come to, that you could actually be like a media producer out of your own house. And so it went on to have several million views, and kind of changed the way I was thinking about media. It was I knew that media was changing our relationships, but then actually like participating in that kind of way made me realize, like, okay, this is different. Like maybe everybody has a voice. So I got really excited about new media at this time. This is, I think, the heyday of social media, 2007 to 2010 or so. Everybody's really excited. There were people like Sean Ahmed out there who had met Gregory Sachs, who said that we could end poverty in our lifetime. And here's this kid, he's at Notre Dame, and he's going to school, and I'm going to help poverty. And so he went to Bangladesh, and he started making videos on YouTube. He ended up gathering 280,000 Twitter followers, and all these followers wanted to help. And suddenly, like, he's tasked with essentially like getting their donations and figuring out what to do with them. He basically reinvented the NGO from the ground up using social media. This is a clip from his work here.
You guys, through your votes and video responses, will decide how I will be spending some of this donation money.
I'm not.
Stay strong, stay strong.
We were very, very glad to do so.
Here is my vote. Rebuild the school.
And there's really like so much hope in that video, and there's so much more behind the scenes that you don't even realize, because the music itself was created through an open source sound project called OP Sound. And so when you're listening to that, that's Colin Muchler up here in Washington that provided the guitar track, and then Cora Beth way over in the Carolinas hears it and adds her violin, and then Vavrek, who is from France, adds like the drum beat and puts it together to create the music that was the soundtrack for what you just heard. So at this moment, 2007 to 2010, there's a lot of sharing, a lot of collaboration globally, a lot of really amazing things happening. Another one of my favorite examples of this is this moment. This is Eric Whitaker's virtual choir, in which about 200 people from 12 different countries joined in to sing his song. So he released all of his music for free online. People could review it. They could, and then they could actually just like sing on YouTube. And he would gather all the YouTube videos and make a choir out of it. And it's just this amazing piece of, and it really to me like became metaphorical for what the digital landscape could be, where every voice could be lifted up and made better by all the other voices around it. And the metaphor really goes deep here, because it's not just about making beautiful art, it's about changing the world. Like in 2008, then when Kenya had these really violent elections, these 4 Kenyans got together and they created this website called Ushahidi, which means witness in Swahili. And so you could basically use an ordinary cell phone, even a dumb phone, and report what was going on the ground during all this violence. And this is a time when normal media had broken down. So suddenly you have 42,000 people unleashed as citizen reporters to report on what was happening. Then they gave away that platform. So 3 years later, when the Haiti earthquake happened, all these students at Tufts University just took the same platform and created Ushahidi Haiti. And again, tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of people contributed toward finding victims, like asking questions like, we're looking for Gaby Joseph, who got buried under Royal University. And then all of this is mapped, and the map itself is not Google Maps because it wasn't good enough. They actually used OpenStreetMaps, and people were tracing satellite imagery all over the world to create the most sophisticated maps that were actually on the ground in the hands of rescuers. So here's some Clark Craig from the Marine Corps saying, "It is saving lives every day. I wish I had time to document every example, but there are too many. I say with confidence that there are hundreds of these kinds of success stories. The Marine Corps is using your project every second of the day to get aid and assistance to the people that need it most." And that's 2010, and I was really excited about digital media. And then, here's the thing. We knew then, and we know now, that there is a progression that's happening, that we're headed toward ubiquitous network, ubiquitous computing, ubiquitous information at a limited speed about everything, everywhere, from anywhere, on all kinds of devices. Like, that's the overview of where we're going. And the one that people overlook is this one, and particularly the algorithm and how powerful the algorithm is. And so I've actually spent several years now studying algorithms with computer scientists who actually build algorithms. And we've done a lot of field work on it. It's been really fascinating. And I want to share with you a few insights about the power of algorithms and how they affect our everyday lives. So I'm going to start here. This is actually, these are not my colleagues here. This is Lipson and Schmidt out at Cornell. And what they do is they created this program. What they're doing here is they have a double pendulum, and it's very random. It appears random in the way that it spins. And then they have all these cameras watching it, and then the computer is plotting all of the movements based on the camera input. So this is the raw data. And then from that raw data, the computer then does a series of decision trees, basically creating an algorithm that can predict what's going to happen next. And here it is, like showing how close it is getting to full accuracy over time. But it takes some time for the computer to actually get there, but very quickly it gets to the Hamiltonian equation, which is like a really difficult thing that took, hundreds of years of human thought to. this computer is doing it in a matter of minutes. And most interesting then is then they release this program that's called Eureka, and you can use it as well. If you have a big data set and you can't see a pattern in it, Eureka will look at it and it'll see a pattern in it. So this one guy who does cell biology decided to put a bunch of data in there about cell degeneration and regeneration and so on, really complex biodata. And he puts it in, and sure enough, Eureka comes up with a formula. And the formula works, but there's a problem.
The equation was right.
These equations match the data, and in fact, they explain new data.
These equations could even predict what the cell was about to do. But, hold the champagne, there's just one little problem here. The formulas check out, but
We don't know what they mean.
So this is where algorithms are at today. It's like a lot of them are so complex we don't know what they mean. So they sort of transcended our human capacity to understand why they work. Now this matters because algorithms are at work on Wall Street, for example. About 80% of trades on Wall Street are now done by algorithm. And these algorithms are actually playing against other algorithms. And that's part of the reason why humans can't figure out what's going on anymore, because the algorithms are actually thinking weak and working against each other and sort of playing off of each other. Just to give you a sense of what this looks like, this is, again, so we're back in 2011 when a lot of this stuff started to really pick up. You'll notice here the headline news from Bloomberg is actually listed here with out to the 1,000th of a second. And this is important because this headline, while humans might read it, headlines are as much for computers as they are for humans. Computers are actually reading the headlines too. And watch what happens in the next 4 seconds after this headline. This is Hewlett-Packard in the next 4 seconds. So by the time a human could actually read the headline and make a decision on it, even if you're like sort of a master decision maker that can make a decision in less than a second, it takes you 3.5 seconds to read it, you make the decision in the next half a second, the market has already spiked and is back to where it was by the time you can decide. The algorithms are basically totally in control of these sort of really quick trades. But to go to something more mundane and more relevant to your life would be, you go to Target or something like that, and you guys may have heard this story about, this is back in 2012, when we again started to see the power of these algorithms. There was a guy got this flyer in the mail for his daughter, who's 15 years old, and it was for all this pregnancy stuff, and he was in children's stuff, and he was like, what's going on here? So he lived in Minneapolis, goes down to Target, and he goes into Target, and he says, why are you sending my daughter this stuff? This is crazy, she's 15 years old. And they're very apologetic and so on. But then 2 days later, he has to call back, and he says, I'm sorry, stuff going on in my house I didn't know about, and it turns out Target knew that she was pregnant before he did. And they knew not because she had bought some prenatal vitamins or something like that. It was because she had bought unscented towels, or no, unscented lotion. And apparently those two things, if you buy those two things in the same shopping trip, there's a 70% chance that you're pregnant. And this is just big data. It's just big data at work, apparently. And so Target knows all, but they've actually got away from how much they actually know because it freaks people out. And so nowadays when you get your, they are pretty targeted, but they've also mixed some other stuff in so they don't freak out too much. If you want to know more about that, you can look up the New Yorker magazine has an article called How Companies Learn Your Secrets. A lot of this technology was built by a company called Hunch, which is now sold to eBay. And a lot of companies like it are being bought up by Netflix and all these other places that are trying to figure out your taste. They want to know you very deeply. And so what Hunch does is they find out your preferences on really mundane things so they can build this really big data set. Like, do you like to use pencils or gel pens? And it turns out that if you like to use pencils, you're more likely to ride your bike to work than if you use gel pens. I mean, so this is the actual thing here. Compared to people who prefer pencils, gel pen users are more likely to, and it turns out that gel pen users are 23% more likely to drive solo to work than pencilers, who are comparatively more likely to bike. And these little things then actually help them understand you, and larger data sets allow them to understand you in even more detail. So Netflix is trying to use this data to predict what kind of movies you want to watch, because it turns out you are not very good at knowing what movies you want to watch. They know this because things that you star with 5 stars, like this you actually watch is very different. And so they're trying to crack that, and they're trying to partner with people like Hunch to do that. Pandora, of course, is also using huge data sets based on what you like to listen to, and that simple thumb up, down is leading to those large data sets. Mike McCreary over in, he grew up in Nebraska where I'm from, but then decided to get into the game of algorithms and music. And he went a slightly different direction. He took all the top music from the last 40 years, now going back to and he just let a computer, again, sort of Eureka, just analyze the data itself. The computer's listening to the music, it's analyzing the data. And he found these like little clusters. And he basically said if you have that had a song that hit these clusters, you are likely to have a hit song. Now he doesn't actually know what the computer is hearing or recognizing that creates these clusters. So he can't tell you need to have this kind of beat or this kind of whatever. He just knows that for whatever reason, if you hit this, you do it. And he decided to test it, this music X-ray, which he used. He decided to test it on 300 albums that nobody had ever heard before. And out of that whole stack, he said, none of these, the computer said, none of these are any good. But there's one that is very, it said it's got 8 out of the 11 will be big hits. And that was this. Which is amazing because Norah Jones didn't sound like anything at the time that was in the top, in the top 10 or even the top 100. And so it was a real like vindication of his work. Now taking this one step further, and this is where it gets relevant, learning is all about, which I'm really interested in, is David Cope out at UC Santa Cruz not only selects music you're gonna like or selects what's gonna be a hit, but he actually feeds his algorithm score music from some particular composer. He started with like Bach and Beethoven, and then his algorithm actually creates a new score in the same style that sounds like Bach or Beethoven, and it's so good that it actually fools like academics, music, like professional academics. He has orchestras play this stuff, so it's not like computer music coming out of a computer. He sets up huge, big stage performances, and his work is just super, like people just hate it. Like the musicians just hate it because they get fooled by it and then they feel like this is the end of art. Like this is terrible. So this is one of his computer scores here. And this actually leads to one other piece here, and that is when you go online, especially this back in 2011, this started, when algorithms really started to pick up the pace. Here you can see this is an article about a football game, and it's written by btn.com staff, which is actually a robot. It's just basically it's taken a box score and then it's like fiddled with it to create a narrative. And Stephen Levy has actually suggested that by 2012, he was saying in 2012 that by the end of this decade, we'll have a Pulitzer Prize winning robot. so the interesting thing then and what this means for learning is that a whole lot of things that, it's almost like if you're not creating an algorithm, you're going to be replaced by one. But it's not quite like that. It's, as we've done in the last 3 years, we've been researching this with computer scientists. And what's really hard for algorithms to do is to do sort of high-level deep learning that humans do. And so somehow we have to but it's actually really easy for them to do routine learning. And the routine learning is what typically comes out of students who want to get an A and they're trying to just do that strategic thing where they find out how to get the right answer, that kind of thing. So somehow we have to get our students to learn more deeply so that they can actually find a job in this new algorithmic world. So this is where I've been in the last several years, is kind of thinking about how media change, relationships change, communities change, societies change, and we change. in relation to this onslaught of machine learning and so on, and algorithms. So that then leads me to one last, do you have a question so far? Last piece of research that I'll bring up. And this is like my most recent stuff that I've actually never presented, so we'll go to that then. So my latest stuff is kind of picking up on another piece, and it has to do with who students are today and how media might be changing them. And so this is coming back to that idea of rethinking love, family, and ourselves. And way back when I was studying YouTube, like 8 years ago, I started studying YouTube. And to study YouTube, we actually got online, and a bunch of my students got online. And we were just trying to understand why people were talking to each other on YouTube.
Looking at camera, and I have a mirror back here to show you this, but okay. This is what I'm talking to. Not you, this. Both you, but this. I'm talking to you, but for the time being, I don't know who you are.
And this was really hard for students to do, to look into the camera and talk. This was 2000. And just to show you how hard it is, here's another bit here. This is actually put together by a student at that time.
This is what makes me so uncomfortable talking on the camera. It's just I'm looking at my face, I'm like, good God. I don't really think of myself the way I think of other people. I'm just, young and, oh, she's so cute. She's little thing. Not cute.
Now, you hear what she said there. She said, I guess when I think about myself, I don't really think about myself the way I appear to other people. But now compare that to this.
Selfie time.
And these events are 7 or 8 years apart.
And while maybe they'll tweet us their fan photo here. Now at the time, fans, get on.
Have you guys seen this before? This goes on for, it's really disturbing.
See your fan photo. And a Diamondback TV broadcast brought to you by T-Mobile. Look at the one on the right. Do you have to make faces when you take selfies? Wait. Better angle. Check it. That's the best one of the 300 pictures I've taken myself. Every single one is dialed in. Welcome to parenting in 2015. Just completely transfixed by the technology. David Carlson. Oh, hold on, I have to take a selfie with the hot dog. Selfie with the churro. Selfie just of the selfie. I can't even get my phone to take pictures. A picture of your thumb last week, that was good. Here's my first bite of the churro. Here's my second bite of the churro. The beauty of baseball is you can sit next to your neighbor and have a conversation, or you can just completely ignore them. Peralta knocks it into center. David tonight 2 for 2, a leadoff single here in the fourth, and nobody else.
So that's a fun side of this. It's a little disturbing too. There's these stats out there suggesting empathy's on the decline. So I've been super curious about all this kind of stuff and really concerned about it. And realizing that technology has a role in this, and I don't think it's just the new technology. This is a slide that's been on for about 100 years if you look at it through the sociological literature. So for example, you could say that cars and so on, and a lot of the early technologies of the 1900s actually had a dramatic effect on us as well. So they allowed us to move into boxes and then shop in these boxes where we don't know where the stuff is coming from or who's selling it to us, and then look back into the world through these boxes. And then over time, we've just moved into more boxes and shopped in bigger boxes and looked through these boxes. So, Robert Putnam has said that we're bowling alone, or as Livien de Couture said, we live in a capsular civilization. So this is an image of Peter White, who grew up in the 1950s. This is him in Kenya. He became an explorer, and here he is exploring Kenya. And he works for the BBC. He's a great journalist. And he talks about what it was like to grow up in the 1950s. He said when he was a little kid, he was allowed to roam all over his neighborhood unsupervised, even a very small kid, before he was 6 years old even. Then he got to be a little bit older, and he learned to ride a bike, so he could go a little bit farther. And then as he got still older, when he was 12, he started hitchhiking up to 100 miles a day and then coming back at night. This is just a level of public trust we can't imagine. And yet, to really amp this up, sorry, that didn't slide far enough, but Peter White is over here, and he's actually blind. So the actual Peter White in the picture is this blind man here. And you think about what he did as like his parents allowed this blind kid to run around. His parents allowed him to learn to ride a bike, probably without a helmet. And he had scars to prove it, but he was going to do it because everybody else was doing it. And then he gets on, he trusts in speakers. Again, just a level of public trust we can't imagine. So today we're raising our kids, like this. In fact, there's research now that shows that each generation has only explored about 1/9 of the area that the previous generation did, and that's held up for 4 generations now. So like my grandfather explored essentially 80 times, 81 times the area that I explore, and that's actually true for my upbringing. I could explore my block. My grandfather explored, like a 9-mile radius. My kids, to be honest, like I think if we let our kids out of our yard, social services would be called. I mean, this happened, like if you let your 6-year-old go down the street unsupervised, you have trouble. So just like compare, like this is how we're raising our kids today. This is my friend in New Guinea, and that's a real knife. You see the difference here. It's a pretty profound shift here. And so as Brene Brown has pointed out, this is actually for adults as well, we are the most addicted, medicated, obese, and busy adult cohort in human history. She goes on to say that we are numbing ourselves, and you cannot numb emotions safely. So this is a problem because I feel like technologies enable us to numb ourselves, to take an easy way out from hard conversations and so on. And we're numbing ourselves to the possibilities of pain and rejection, but at the same time, we're also numbing ourselves to the possibilities of joy and connection. So these are the things that I've become interested in exploring, and this is like some philosophical mumbo jumbo that we can scoot through. It's just a model that I've been thinking about. It's very primitive. This is all new work, so I'm not sure if it's right, and if you have any comments, I'd be willing to hear them. Basically, it's the starting place here is that for the last 100 years, we've been producing this sort of more and more individualistic society that also operates through instrumental reason, which means instrumental reason is like you're just trying to achieve efficiency and just do things. And when you an instrumental reason way of looking at somebody is like when they cut you off on the freeway, you don't see them as a person. You see them as somebody that's in your way, because they're like inhibiting your efficiency. So we use technology for individualistic and instrumental needs. Creates boxes. We put ourselves in these boxes. That creates disconnection and disenchantment. But then on the flip side of this, it reverses itself, and because we're disconnected and feeling disenchanted, we want connection and we want reality. We want some authenticity. We really crave it. And we crave it through technological solutions. And so technological solutions move more and more toward creating ever more realistic and authentic experiences like virtual reality. But in the meantime, it just feeds our individualism. And so virtual reality, of course, while it appears that we're more immersed and having reality and connection, we're actually wearing a headset and completely connected.
So I was thinking about it earlier, talking, and by the way, I think I have 2.5 million views of virtual.
Okay, thanks.
You talked about this, the golden age of social media,
Mm-hmm.
and it led into this, the machine learning aspect.
Yeah.
When you talk about, I think it was Cope, and
Yeah.
the compositions, you had to have Bach and Beethoven's work
Mm-hmm.
for his algorithm to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, as I watch this, do we get to a phase where there had to be a box in Beethoven, and there were, or maybe there didn't have to be. I'm going to start with the premise that there had to be a box in Beethoven a minute.
Yeah.
There had to be reporters writing those box scores into sentences.
Yeah.
So the machine has really learned as well in the past few years. Are we in the phase where we're trying to start mimicking or learning the machine?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, is that this could flip. Like, certainly we are still the creative force. And I guess like what you're proposing would be what some people call the singularity almost, right? It's like, you guys, are you fans of the singularity?
We talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting notion. I think, you know, again, I'm still of the opinion there, and we say this, and then every 5 years we have to readjust because the algorithms prove us wrong. Because there's always like this where you make this distinction. You say like, well, humans are different in this way, and what the easy answer is that humans are obviously creative. Like, we are the Bachs and the Beethovens, and the computers aren't doing that; they're just mimicking that. I think this is pretty well played out in some like science fiction, like is it Her? Is that the? And I think what's interesting about that is, or is it she or her? I can't remember. Anyway, that in that movie, I think, and in a lot of other ones as well, there's this sense if machines truly become intelligent, they're going to, and this is the Matrix too, they're going to recognize that their needs are actually different than ours. And, you know, whether what we think of as human creativity is a part of that is going to be another question. That's a really big question, though. Yeah?
About the algorithms earlier. My whole family uses my login for Netflix, so my choice is...
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I use my friend's Safeway card number to buy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are these algorithms sophisticated enough to cost that stuff, or is it also skewing the data?
It's very much skewing the data right now. Very much, yeah. And yeah. I mean, and that's where, you know, some of these larger discussions about identity and whether or not we're going to force people to lock in. Like if you, from a cybersecurity perspective, cybersecurity people want everybody to have a clear identity. They want biometrics on every device so that we always know exactly who's using what. We want that connected, you know, 10 years, 15 years down the line, that's connected to the currency itself with Bitcoin and stuff like that. And then you would have this really powerful data for the algorithms. But I think there is good reason to push back in the way that you're pushing back right now. And there's really good reasons to push back for anonymity, just in terms of maintaining an ability for true free speech and that kind of thing. So these are battles to be had still, and within our lifetimes we're having. That's a really good point to bring. So this is like where I'm at philosophically, and then if you're, how much time do we have left? Okay, so if you're interested, I'll share with you like what I've been doing lately, which is actually field work. I like hang out with students in all kinds of circumstances to learn about their lives, and it's been kind of risky and strange and weird, and I'll just share a few stories from that with you. So this actually started. I'll play I'll play an opening scene here for you to give you a sense. I'm usually mic'd up when I do my field work, so I have a lot of audio for this. So let's see. I'd like not get caught last time. Right? Yeah. It's a little weird for me to like explain what I'm doing out here. Yeah. Okay, so this is me like meeting up with some students. It's about midnight on the college campus, and they've agreed to take me out and show me like what nightlife is like on college. And I've started to do this like on multiple campuses. I give talks like this, and like the night before my talk, I'll actually arrange with my host to say like, hey, can you get some students to take me out so I can see what campus life is like? And so this is what I've been doing. This is my first night that I did this. And so we get together, and I'll play another clip here so you guys. So, and what they've decided to do is like, right here is, so I have a little hat on for this. And then they decide they want to go buildering, which is climbing buildings illegally to get on top of these buildings. And so basically we're like scurrying along like fire escapes and so on, just looking for a place where we can actually get up on the roof. And so here you can hear like HVACs and stuff like that as we're moving along. And then everything's going pretty well for me, and I'm fine, like I can handle this. This is fine. Like I don't feel like too nervous about my life or my job. And then we come here.
Climb over onto the ledge and walk around, and then jump up from there.
Wait, is that actually happening? So death will be at hand. Man. So they want to like climb up this thing, and then they actually have to jump to this ledge, which is only like 12 inches wide, and if you fall, you're done. So that was a little scary for me. And the gravity is not the only problem. There's also like security, and so here we kind of get stuck, and you can hear the students saying left, right, center, and then you hear the radio, the security guard who's right behind us. And there's like nobody else on campus, so he's making it known that he's there watching us. And fortunately, my host immediately start talking about homework very loudly here.
Yeah, no, like the IPA, which is the all the sounds.
So the security guard peels off and starts obscure linguistic anthropology homework. And so then we're okay. And then maybe I should back up. Like if you're thinking about like why am I out here? Like essentially, like, I'm potentially risking my job, possibly risking my life if I tried to jump on these ledges and so on. It is really like because of this an idea that had started to come into my mind. I've always like tried to create students who ask big questions, take chances, embrace failure, all these kinds of things. And I started to wonder if maybe I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't feeling like I was connecting with students as much as usual. So then I started like taking students out to lunch, and this happened like 2 or 3 years ago. And as I was taking them out to lunch, I discovered that they had concerns that went farther than I thought they did. And they weren't at college just to get a job or to find a way to make a living. They were trying to find a way to lead a life worth living. And I started to think that education was a lot bigger than we normally think of it. You know, it's not just like acquiring skills, it's like a lot bigger. And then one of my students took a gap year. He just like left school for a year. He rode his bike to South America, and he came back, and he was in many ways everything that I want in my students. So this is Jordan Thomas. And he was everything I wanted them to be, and he was like lit up by these ideas. And I remembered as he came back, like what it meant to really like do field work, like the joy of going to New Guinea and discovering all these new things in New Guinea.